So this is what our world map looks like. The map that we are all familiar with. A map that is forever changing due to political and sometimes geographical changes. But when you remove one or more countries, things start to look odd. The map that we've all grown up with instantly looks kind of ugly. Our brains love patterns and recognition, so when we look at a map like this with many countries missing, it instantly looks weird. But what if we were to remove the 3 largest countries from each continent? How would our new world map look and how would it affect the planet? Let's find out. So let's do this alphabetically, meaning Africa, Europe first. So Africa's 3 largest countries are Algeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sudan. They come in at 2.38, 2.34 and 1.86 million kilometers squared respectively. This makes them the 10th, 11th and 15th largest countries on Earth. So let's go ahead and remove them. This is now how the world and Africa looks. Now, to be honest, although there is now over 6 million kilometers squared of missing countries, the continent hasn't changed too drastically. The Mediterranean now pours further south and has now made once landlocked countries such as Niger and Mali no longer landlocked, likely significantly boosting their economies as they could trade with countries further afield more easily. The Red Sea now expands west and touches many central and northeastern African countries such as Libya, Chad, the Central African Republic and South Sudan. Now, the DR Congo, although a large country, only has a tiny amount of coastline. Its western coast sits on the Atlantic, and with the country now disappearing, it floods into Central Africa. Alright, so that is Africa. Let's now move on to the next continent, Asia. So Asia is a little more complicated due to the fact that its largest country is transcontinental. So the Asian part of Russia is still larger than any country in Asia, and in fact any country on Earth. The part that sits in Asia is around 13 million kilometers squared. The next largest Asian country is China, who comes in at around 9.5 million kilometers squared, and then finally India at just under 3.3 million. So altogether around 26 million kilometers squared has been wiped from Asia. And I think we can all agree that the map is starting to look a bit strange. Not only has 26 million kilometers squared of land been wiped out, but also around 2.5 billion people. The Korean peninsula has now become an island, Mongolia has become more isolated, and Southeast Asia has broken away from the rest of the continent. Alright, let's now move on to Europe. Well, we've already kind of started as we've already removed Russia, which, although finding the majority of its land in Asia, still has its European part larger than any country on the continent. The European part of Russia is just under 4 million kilometers squared, making it over 6 times larger than the country who is the largest country found solely on the continent, Ukraine. And then at around 550,000 kilometers squared, metropolitan France comes in third. So this is how our world map now looks. I don't think it's changed too much as Russia has already been removed. The Black and Caspian Sea have merged together and have now reached the shores of Belarus, Romania and even Poland. Alright, so this is where things start to get really odd when we move on to North America. So now we're about to lose 2 of the largest countries on Earth, Canada and the US, losing nearly 20 million kilometers squared. But who then comes in third? Well, Mexico is nearly 2 million kilometers squared. However, Greenland actually sits within the North American continent and covers an area of over 2.1 million kilometers squared. But as it's not a country of its own and in fact a dependency of the Danish kingdom, let's go ahead and stick with Mexico. So now our world map is starting to look truly different. The vast majority of North America has been wiped out. Excluding Greenland as mentioned earlier, Nicaragua is now the largest country on the continent at just 130,000 kilometers squared. Not only have we wiped out around 32 million kilometers squared of land, we've took out around 500 million people and around $32 trillion worth of the global economy. The Atlantic now meets the Pacific over Central America and the Caribbean. Let's now move on to Oceania, whose three largest countries are Australia, Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. These three countries cover an area of 7.7 million kilometers squared, 460,000 kilometers squared and 270,000 kilometers squared respectively, totaling around 8.3 million kilometers squared in total. Now, Papua New Guinea and New Zealand are relatively small countries and don't make too much of an impact on the world map. However, Australia, which ranks as the 6th largest country on Earth, does make a large impact on the visuals of our map. On a world map, Australia stands out like a sore thumb. If you don't class Australia as a continent itself and exclude continental landmasses, then it is the largest island on the planet. It has an iconic and instantly recognisable shape, so once removed, it seriously does impact our map. New Zealand, not so much, and in fact, New Zealand is often missed out on many world maps as it is. There is in fact an entire subreddit dedicated to maps without New Zealand. Papua New Guinea also doesn't make too much of an impact, however it does now create this very straight coastal border on the island of New Guinea. Let's now move on to our final continent, South America. In my opinion, this is perhaps the craziest one yet. So the three largest countries on this continent are Brazil, Argentina and Peru, who come in at 8.5, 2.78 and 1.28 million kilometers squared respectively, totaling around 11.5 million kilometers squared. So it's fair to say that South America has been absolutely decimated. It is no longer recognizable. The continent has also lost over half of its economy and population too, along with the majority of the Amazon rainforest. The Atlantic now meets the Pacific in between Bolivia and what is now known as Northern South America. Uruguay is also now an island country. So this is how our new world looks, in all honesty an absolute mess. North America has pretty much been wiped out, South America looks completely different, and Asia has lost a gigantic part of its land. In total, we have lost approximately 83.5 million kilometers squared, alongside 4 billion people. That's over half of Earth's total land, and roughly exactly half of all humans on the planet. For more fun, weird and intriguing geography knowledge, like and subscribe, and as always, thank you very much for watching.